Just for those people watching, I'd like to tell you about our guest today, who's Mary Nondé. Welcome, Mary, and thank you for agreeing to talk to me. I just want to introduce you as, sort of the author of Awakening Your Intuitive Vision, that you do Feng Shui as an advisor, and you're a somatic arts facilitator. And I have to admit that I don't know a great deal about somatic arts facilitating, but I'm sure as we go through the interview, I will find out more, which is always what I want to do on our interviews. So, hello, Mary, and welcome.
Thank you.
So how are you today? You know what I mean? Or how are you and where are you before we start?
Yeah,
Settle you down. How are you and where are you?
I'm good, thank you. I look sideways to my right and I look out at a lovely calm sea. So I'm a stone's throw from the sea in East Devon in Seaton. So I'm in Lyme, looking out over Lyme Bay, and it's all very lovely today. And I believe the temperature's almost up to 18 degrees in the sea, which is
In the sea.
virtually unheard of, I think.
Fantastic.
Um,
Yeah.
so it's lovely, very inviting.
Yeah. So, as you know, today we're going to have just a little talk about, very casually, about you and your work. And I'm just wondering if you would just start by giving me just a brief outline of your early work life, before you kind of got into your somatic arts and your writing and your feng shui. Tell me a little bit about your early work life.
Well, I did the probably the classic thing that you do, a woman of my age. I went to school. I got good grades. I went to university. I did an unusual degree in anthropology. It was unusual at the time, and I came out of it, and I had this inkling about the marketing environment. So I found myself going into what was the world of book clubs. So it's mail order, everything's online now, but in those days it was mail order. And I became a marketing manager of three book clubs, and I was part of a book club company. And from there, so went from anthropology into marketing, and I was in that role commissioning writers and designers to create my catalogs. Anyway, the company hit a bad moment, looking for volunteer redundancies, and my partner and I took it and moved up to the southeast. And from the floor of my apartment in Richmond, I launched myself as a one-off marketing services. So that business that developed and became, in time, over about six years, it was a thriving marketing consultancy. So I was very much entrenched in the corporate world.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, looking back on it, Christina, I think that I'm reflect that for those that took me up to about 35, 36, and then at that point I was getting really making a lot of money. I had a lifestyle, had a sports car, shopped in Milan, all those things, holiday many times a year. But there was something going on inside me that said, I just didn't feel comfortable with this
Yeah.
world anymore. And
Yeah, I mean, as you're talking about it, I'm thinking, well, it's still a very creative world. Although you started off in anthropology, and I'm very interested. I've just recently met an anthropologist who's been working out in Jordan for about 25 years, and that. But so I like anthropology, but even though it was a corporate world, you were working in a very creative world, with your books and your book writing and marketing. That to me is an incredibly creative kind of world. And as you've sort of alluded to, you realize that that wasn't really where your spark was. So, what was the moment when you sort of that meant the die was cast and you needed to change direction? What was that moment?
it's really interesting because I've got a feeling that a lot of us can go through that from about the age of 35 to mid 40s, that kind of midlife crisis thing. So the moment when I said I got a little bit disgruntled, it was my whole delivery of the creativity. And by then I was the lead copywriter. And so I was creatively, I mean, I was delivering pieces of writing, but the driver was from without. It was from the clients, it was from their needs. And to fulfill their agendas and their values and their
Okay.
goals. And then I think there was something in me saying, there's something more that Mary has that's at the core of her
Mhm.
that wants to be brought back in, and we need to find out what that is. And um, so that was the turning point. It was very, and then you would understand this, Christina. My body told me. So there was like my mind was niggling,
Yeah.
but I wasn't really paying enough attention. So then my body gave me very clear signs. I didn't know what next,
Yeah.
but I needed to stop fronting the company as it was.
Yeah.
Um, and if I had the tools that I now offer people today to help them through these moments of making that transition and finding that personal authority from within, it probably wouldn't have taken me 2 or 3 years to find out what to do next, but I did. Um,
So,
yeah,
you've got such a, an engaging story, and I can tell you're loving telling it. But I'm going to just hold you for a minute to find.
good.
So, what did you have to let go of that would enable you to make the decision to move into something else? If you, pardon me, looking back, what did you have to let go of?
Well, I mean, it was the lifestyle. Like I said, I had, and overnight my salary, if you want to put it that way, halved. So I had to, and the whole lifestyle, the which I described, the car, so it wasn't like I was, and I also had to let go of a world I knew. I knew how to be the sales and marketing director,
Yeah.
but I didn't know what else at that point. And so I think that no man's land, if you like, between what you do know and you let go of, which was the lifestyle, and the uncertainty of
Mhm.
the certainty of knowing something, and just hang out in that space
Yeah.
enough time to find what it was, the thread that I needed to follow next.
Mm. And what internal strength did you need to tap into, to help you basically to know for certain that you were making the right decision or on the right path? What was that internal strength, do you think?
Um, I don't know. I think I've always been a person, if I think about trust, is basically, and also I wasn't, it's not like I threw everything out the window all at once. I did stay working for the agency. I worked my way out of the agency. So I still had work for 2 days a week with the agency,
Yeah.
which they were grateful for. And then the rest of the time was my own to explore
Mm.
what I wanted to do next. So, and then in that space, the trust comes because when you're not, I think, not fully occupied, then the intuitive guidance finds you.
Mm.
And mine found me, a friend said, would you like to come to there's a talk on this evening on feng shui. I'd never heard of feng shui. And I went to the talk and I thought, it's interesting. I do this already. When I travel for my work, I rearrange the furniture in the hotel rooms and, and I thought I just didn't, I'd never heard of it. And I felt that of all the things I was looking at, which by then were in the complementary therapies, healing arts area, I thought this is the one, this is where I start. And that's how I started to make that transition. Yeah, does that answer your question really about what did I need to find?
Absolutely. I mean, I think, I'm sort of thinking about it and that transition and that change and wondering, what what was it that drew you to Feng Shui? Then what was it about Feng Shui that drew you to that? I mean, okay, it sort of fitted your pattern of life. You were already moving things around, and you probably didn't know why you were moving them around, but they just felt better when you did. What do you think it was that drew you to that particular aspect of the healing arts or the complementary medicine, whichever way you sort of talk about it?
I don't think I could consciously articulate that at the time. Just a knowing, a preparedness to be open at that time and not to take my time, which is curiously a phase I'm going through now, these years later,
Mm.
for different reasons. So, and then being in that room and hearing, it was, I couldn't have named it, but it was dealing with what was going on below the surface of things that I instinctively found I did most of the time, even in as a marketing consultant. So I think my strength was that I would listen, not just with my logical left brain, but my intuitive right brain when I was in those meetings. So I was always very attuned to what was going on, what wasn't being said, but was absolutely something that needed to be known. And therein lies feng shui, really. You're looking at, you're tuning into what's this environment telling me about the lives and fortunes of the people here, and is it in alignment with what they want from their life, and how do we move the furniture around metaphorically and physically to create that alignment and flow, to get that person into flow. So I think it was a recognition of this is something that I was naturally good at.
Mm.
And yeah, and I think I'm at the point too, Christine, of writing a memoir and of some sections of my life. And if I look back on it, I recognize that I've been the person who's been, because of circumstances, because I didn't have heavy duty parenting. In fact, I was semi-feral. I had to,
Recognize that.
you know, find my own way.
Yeah.
And what do? You know, there must have been tuning in to that other level that was occurring even as a child and a teenager. So that was familiar to me.
Yeah. And
Um,
you sort of talked about intuition, and now you've talked about tuning in. What is that? What is that ability that you have to that actually enables you to do that? Because I think that's not something that everybody can do. You know, they can sweep aside their intuition because there is nothing concrete. They don't maybe understand. So what do you think is it for you, that intuition and that tuning in? Where is that in your system that enables you to do it?
yeah, I actually think that we all have that
Mm,
ability, and you probably think that too. It's just that we're so very conditioned, and I think if I look back on it, because I didn't have that um, obvious parental conditioning, I was living a quite out of the box in quite an open way. So where I would find that now, and don't get me wrong, in that first part of my life, I was very willful and, you know, wanted to achieve specific ideas I wanted and goals I wanted to achieve and so on. So, and I was busy but that intuition comes from a more spacious place for me. So
mm,
it's when I take my foot off the pedal. Like this morning, I took a walk along by the sea, and I'm not thinking. It's a semi-meditative state. So I'm not thinking. I'm not consciously telling myself, don't think,
mm,
but I'm idling. And in that space, things come to me.
mm.
That's my sort of daily practice. And I think and then I use, of course, I use the tools that I've developed, which is this intuitive visioning that I use, which is it's the creation of a board, but the whole of the imagery is coming um, from the intuition. I'm not deciding in advance the intention I've set for making this board or what goals or aspirations I'm looking for. It is a completely open field. And
So,
that's, yeah.
without kind of interrupting your flow, but tell me a bit more about vision boards. What, again, something really creative. So you've kind of moved yourself into a different creative space to the one that you were in when you were in marketing and publishing and things like that. It's a different kind of creative space, but still a creative space. So tell me a bit about vision boards and what they mean for you and how you use them.
Okay. Well, so I'd made that transition from corporate
Mm.
through feng shui, and I had a very um, fulfilling feng shui business. But actually, I had to think again because I found myself, I became a mother and then I became a single mother. And my feng shui business took me, I am answering your question, I promise, Christina.
Okay.
Um, I found that the feng shui was taking me away from home, and I now had a daughter who needed me. She was 4, needed me to be at home. So I consciously thought, what can I do to bring things closer to home? And then I went back to university and I did a PGCE first of all, which you'll recognize in dance
Yeah.
movement, dance expression. So that was a very creative use of dance. It's following the movement in the body and seeing where that leads you and where it's stuck and where it's not flowing. But that PGCE developed into the somatic arts psychotherapy master's degree, which is where the idea came for doing the intuitive visioning boards that I do now. So while we weren't taught how to do intuitive vision boards at university, what we did learn, what that was all about, was how to track what was going on below the level of the conscious mind. So there's very much depth psychology, Carl Jung, and how to get access to that middle zone between what we know and what we don't know, but is available as in a non-physical, it's unmanifest potential. And the dialogue between the two can be through any kind of somatic art or movement, which is what I did a lot of. So I know you're very familiar. We did modeling and painting and voicing and all that. But I, as a way of describing what couldn't be described, articulated verbally through the image making, and that to me was um, I loved it, but I wanted something that was very practical, a tool that anybody could do that still described what was happening below the person's conscious awareness that was of value to them, including what you might say shadow aspects that had been left behind or pushed to one side, but were actually getting in the way of that person moving forward. So I arrived at the collaging, if you wanted, the intuitive collaging, and as a means of doing it, because anybody can use magazines and scissors and stick it down. But in effect, it is a somatic art. In my terms, it's a somatic arts process. It's coming from the whole of the body of the person and not just, what the mind creates, which I feel makes it different from your more typical, it looks like a vision board, but it isn't a typical vision board because mostly a typical vision board, the person is deciding in advance, has a real strong sense of what that board should contain, and they're looking for images to match.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Yeah, you know.
Well,
So
I was about to ask you, sort of how do you go about finding the right image? Because, you might have magazines, presumably, but if I looked through I don't know, a housekeeping magazine or a holiday magazine or whatever, how do you know when you've found the right picture or the right image, I should say, because it probably isn't always a picture. What goes on in your body when you say, ah, that speaks to me, and how do you know that?
I think the you the process I use for myself, and I live by my boards. I've got about, I think, about 20 of them now over the
Wow.
years. So I live through, the guidance I receive on the board, and I stay close to it. So what I can say for myself and facilitating others, I always have to get myself in the right mindset. So it's not like I can sit down and just get my magazines, and I need to make that shift into that more vacuous, open, empty space, still space. And then when and on the workshop that I do, I use various techniques to help people let go of the controlling mind.
Right.
So that by the time that by the time, to answer your question, when they get to the magazines, I've already ingrained in them. You're not thinking, you're just allowing, you're looking through the magazine, anything, a color, a shape, or anything that catches your eye, just tear it out. Don't stop, keep moving, keep tearing, so that the person just is not evaluating or judging what they've found or what it is. And I mean, obviously, there'll be moments where somebody might say, "Oh, I know what that image is," and I'm tearing it out. But it's they're in a flow, and so they end up with a whole pile of images that in a sense, they've called them to them. It's like some extra hand is at play here, guiding that person to the right image. So the trust that we spoke about yesterday comes in trusting the those, and this comes over time, I have to say. And I'm really, I've been doing it a long time, but in knowing that the absolute right images for you are in that pile, and you're just going to lay them out, like an oracle here for you to access over the coming months, and the significance and the meaning of them you'll become consciously aware of over time. So it's not like you'll have that immediate understanding. You have ideas as to what they might mean, but it's trust, because the intuition doesn't, I don't believe, happen in that quick fire way. It's very soft and slightly speaks in metaphors and colors, and you have to wait until it becomes evident what that significance of it for you.
So I suppose what happens is the image speaks to you for some reason. You might not know what that
Yeah,
reason is. And then when it gets onto the board, at some point later, maybe, is when the actual meaning of it turns up. To me,
yeah,
it could be that you don't know for quite a while until you start living with the board and say, oh, I know kind of what that means. I know
yeah.
that means now, but I didn't know at the time. I just was taken by the color or by the shape or by whatever it is that draws you to something in a magazine. So
It,
I kind of get that. Yeah, yeah,
it's sort of it's because I believe the images are spoken to you on that other level, the right brain more than the left brain, on the intuitive level. The board seems to work away at you in that way too. So, I've got my current board, which I made in October last year, behind me. So I'm regularly tuning into it, as I say. What I mean by that is I'm looking at it, and on a particular day, an image might catch my attention, and contemplated a little bit, and then I probably let go of it. But then the curious thing happens that I get on with my life, and I think it works away at me. So I find myself in a situation which will turn out to be quite synchronistic, and things happen and fall into place that I hadn't planned. And then I might go back to my board and I look at it and I think, oh my goodness, it was on my board all the time.
So
It
it's sort of
has,
working at a conscious and an unconscious level. So it's like,
yes,
it's a bit like people talk about when you set goals. You set goals and then you let them go, and then
yeah,
they should appear at some point. Might not be identical to the goal that you set, but it was something like that, and you've done it sort of visually. So I am aware that we're sort of almost half an hour into our discussion, and I'm just wondering, before we sort of come to an end today, is there anything else that you'd like to say about, your creativity and the work that you're doing, or where you are right now? Before we sort of, what else would you like to?
yeah, right. Um, well, I would say that I've lived by my boards, and as you well know, that the one of the classic boards I made in the last few years landed me a husband and
Yeah.
landed me living by the sea, and that board was just full of the signs were all there, but it was uncanny, including a profile of my husband. The two, a couple in profile, and the profile looks almost identical to Sam, and the one of the woman is my curly hair. And anyway, it was. But it's interesting, as I alluded to earlier, because I find myself since I've moved to the coast, which was coming up interestingly repeatedly as a symbol or symbolically on my boards. And now I'm living here. I've moved back down to Devon, but a different part of Devon. And so there is no sign of the sea images on my current board because I don't need to vision it or call it in anymore because I got the message and here I am living by the sea, which is absolutely wonderful. And having got here, I'm now also, it feels a little bit like I described as that transition zone between when I left corporate life and um, was in this, it's not quite a no man's land that I was then in finding my way. I wasn't unhappy, but I was finding my way. But it's a sense of I need to allow things. I need to give space. There would be, being me, moved to the coast, a tendency to think I've got to go all out and find a network group or meet people or whatever. And I've got really strong messages from my current board that this is a moment to not do that, but to take my time to the board's images on the board that speak to me of hesitancy in a good way, like wait. I got lots of images, quite a few images of women being very still. They're listening. They're not galloping off at a rate to get things done. And I need to do that, Christina. That's what I've been doing. And in the space of that, I think this memoir, the writings that I want to do are coming forward alongside. I mean, I'm still running my workshops and I'm still doing feng shui consultations, but I need to let space for that to come through. And it's important. It's
That's
hard though, isn't it, not to think that, wait a minute.
I'm very good at just waiting and seeing what happens. In fact,
Oh, God.
everything in my life has been about, "Oh, I don't know what next," and I've just waited, and something has always come along, or something I've instigated something. So I know that space well. I like it. So I'd like to say, really big thank you for today. I really appreciate that you've given me time today to speak to you. And I'm really looking forward to hearing how your adventure continues. And, I'd like you to keep us updated.
Will do. Thank you.